Hello to all of our friends as you make your way back to the main room. We're getting close to closing out our session, but I promise you that sticking around for this next component of our agenda today will be worthwhile. It's always a privilege and an honor, and I'm not just sucking up because she's my boss, but the opportunity to include Cheryl Oldham as part of our program today is something that we're really grateful for the opportunity to do. Cheryl serves as Senior Vice President of the Center for Education and Workforce, as well as Vice President of Education Policy on the Chamber C6 side of the House. So Cheryl really has incredible oversight over everything that's happening in education and workforce nationally at a state and local level, as well as within even the chamber itself. So she's going to spend a couple of minutes talking about our America Works initiative that's kind of fueled by both the chamber and the Chamber Foundation, perfectly for her, given she has those two hats to play. So with that, Cheryl, we hand it over to you and we'll get your slides up and running for you. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jamie. And I just want to thank everybody for being here and to acknowledge Jamie and Nikki and Laura and of course Jason for their leadership on this important work, and just want to thank them for allowing me the opportunity to spend, I don't know, what are we at now, 8 minutes talking to you guys. So I'm gonna be quick about it. But as Jamie said, we have this new initiative called, well, it's actually not even that new anymore. It's about a year old under the Chamber and Chamber Foundation called America Works. But let's get to the first sort of substantive slide. I feel like I do this, talk about this initiative quite a lot. And I like to kind of start with a few data points just to kind of crystallize, I guess, the importance of this work. And I feel like this is probably the wrong group of people to be sharing these data points with, because this is nothing new to you all. But as you see on the left, the 11.5 versus 5.9, this is sort of the latest data on job availability versus worker availability. So we are, continuing that gap, sort of continues to expand over the last few months. So now we're at over 5.5 million person gap. The next set of numbers, the 0.64 versus 2.7, is the worker shortage index. So that basically says to you there's about 2/3 of a person available for every open job, and it is the lowest that number has ever been, and low is not good for that number. You want it to be higher, and the 2.7 is sort of a historical average. The 94% comes from some data and surveying that we did at the chamber that shows 94% of businesses say hiring workers, finding workers is difficult or very difficult, and having a considerable impact in their community and on their economy. And then the final one is actually a little bit of a dated statistic, but I think while this number is getting better, this is still stark, and I think it paints a picture for us. So this comes from the first jobs report of 2022, and the 1 million is the number of male workers to re-enter the labor market versus 39,000 women. So we see that gap, and we've seen it over the course of the pandemic and over the course of the last 2 years, where you've had men return to the labor force quicker and return to working quicker than women. Okay, next slide. So this is just a quote from our CEO, because it's a nice setup for the America Works initiative. About a year ago, March, we got a new president and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, and in her sort of inaugural speech, becoming CEO, she talked about workforce as a priority for her in her tenure, and sort of a top 3 issue for things that she planned to work on. And this is a quote from that speech. Let's go to the next slide. So when she made that pronouncement, the good news was we had a lot of work already underway, and many of you have been a part of it with us for a number of years. But we wanted to sort of bring together the whole of the chamber, and Chamber Foundation is how we like to describe it. And so we created the America Works initiative. Thank you, Jason Tishko. I think you named it. And it has three big buckets. One is the research and data, two is a policy agenda and advocacy, and three is the employer-led solutions piece. And that is primarily the work that you all have been talking about today, the work that you work with us on that is driven out of the Chamber Foundation. Next slide. So on the research side, I'm going to get to, I want to highlight the data center for you because I think it's a good place for you to go if you are looking for kind of the latest information from available data sources that we have. And so this is a newly created within the last couple months data center that tries to kind of bring all those publicly available data sources together to kind of paint a picture. There's some analysis there from our economist and his team. And so it's just a good sort of one-stop shop for you if you're looking for sort of the latest in trends and analysis. I'll also get, after I talk about the policy piece, I'll talk about another resource that we have yet to release, but will soon, and hopefully it'll be useful to you and to your members, for those of you that are chambers and have members. Next slide. The policy agenda piece is a big component of this. Obviously, given the chamber's role in this, policy and advocacy, a really important role for the chamber. And so we wanted to bring together, the various pieces of a more forward-looking workforce agenda that would include, would broadly include not just traditional workforce training, but things like childcare, second chance hiring, immigration. And I'll just walk through these a little bit and tell you what they are, and then give you a little bit of insight into what's happening at the federal level. And, no, not going to be a big surprise to you, not a lot. But the first piece of the 5-point agenda is removing barriers to work. And for us, we think about, going back to that 1 million versus 39,000, this issue of childcare being a big one to why we're not getting more women back into the workforce. And for some of you, I know you were just in a breakout listening to my colleague Erin talk about childcare. And so that that's a big portfolio of work for us. This is probably the one area where the federal government is spending some time. That's not to say they're going to do anything necessarily, but that is a place that is receiving a lot of attention, both through the Build Back Better on the sort of Democrat side of the House, and then you've got some legislation on the Republican side as well, looking at the Child Care and Development Block Grant. So there is some action, and there's some focus, and there's some rhetoric around the issue. It remains to be seen whether or not there'll be a lot of action, and happy to have deeper, longer conversations about where the chamber is on our positioning here for those that might be interested. The second is expanding the pools of talent. And that's just to say, with that large gap, we need to be thinking about other pools that we can bring into the labor market. Folks that we hadn't been thinking about, second chance hiring being a great example, maybe veteran hiring, older workers. We've seen a lot of early retirements over the last couple of years. So what are some opportunities to bring more people back into that market? The third is the helping Americans acquire the skills, certainly. New pathways aligned to industry needs. When we think about this, we generally think the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and that is up for reauthorization. It's one that just saw some action this week in the House. Don't think it's actually going to go anywhere for the rest of the year. So we've got some time to make that legislation better. And from our perspective, really that alignment to what do you all need? What do the employer community need? What does industries need? That's going to be a lot of where we'll focus our time. Fourth, around improving educational and job opportunities. So better information, some different and better tools around investing in and maintaining skills. And then finally, welcoming global talent through immigration. So Chamber has long been a vocal advocate for immigration reform, and that is sort of key to expanding that pool of talent as well. Again, not a lot happening at the federal level. So I think we're going to be in a position where we have to sort of wait for the next Congress and maybe begin to make some headway around some of these issues, particularly the workforce training. Next slide. I'm not going to spend any time here because you all know the Chamber Foundation's employer-led solutions well, but this is just to say that that bucket includes the pieces that you all have been talking about here today: talent pipeline management, T3 and the JetX project, talent finance, and new and innovative ways to invest in talent. And then finally, I'll just close with just a sneak preview for a resource that we hope will be really helpful to you. And this really was born out of the idea that our CEO, all of us, really hear from C-suite leaders, employers all the time who say, I can't, workforce is my biggest issue. I can't find workers. Help me with my workforce problem. That's a big, sort of very large, very big problem, and not everyone's problem is the same. And so how do we wanted to really create a resource to help them to think about what their challenge is, and then to ask themselves some key questions, and then take the next steps to kind of like help them narrow in on what the challenge actually is for their company, and then hopefully, provide them some solutions to addressing those challenges. So this is a playbook that we've put together, and I'll just give you one, next slide. I'll show you sort of how it's laid out. It's in sort of these three big challenges. I can't fill job openings. Is that your challenge? Is it that you have trouble retaining talent, or is it you're struggling to diversify your workforce? Can you fit your challenge into one of these buckets? And if you can, then here are the next set of questions that you would want to ask yourself. So for example, on the next slide, we show challenge number one. If that's that you can't fill your jobs, okay, well, step one, analyze your job openings. Start with the most critical questions to ask yourself. Here are some helpful resources. So it's not intended to certainly be an answer to everything, but it's a way to help folks think about the challenges that they're facing, begin to ask themselves some critical questions, provide some helpful resources, and certainly point a lot of folks back to our direction so we can help them as best we can as well. I'm going to stop there because I think I've overstayed my welcome. I do just want to thank all of you guys for being here again, and just for being fantastic partners to us all, for so many years, and so grateful to get to work with this amazing team. So thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Really appreciate you. And Andrew had a good question in the chat that I'm happy to kind of paraphrase a bit, and just wants to know about the Chamber's response to claims that we've heard, even before the Great Resignation, that really the worker availability gap data are being fabricated by companies and employer sectors to push back on pay increases and workplace flexibility.
I think that's interesting because I think that a lot of the data suggests that wages are going up, right? Many employers are responding with higher wages. So I don't think that, I think that is a little bit of a false narrative to suggest, okay, if you would just pay more, you could find the people. I think there really is an issue with bringing more people back into the labor force. And our economists will say, certainly not an easy challenge to address. And there's so many reasons for why people have left, right? Like they've saved a lot of money over the course of the last couple of years, and maybe they have a little bit more flexibility to stop out for a while and rethink what it is they want to do. I think a lot of folks are just rethinking what life choices and how they want to spend their time. And then again, early retirements, I think health concerns are still, an issue for some. And so, and now we're in a position where there are if you're a worker looking, you're sort of in the catbird seat, right? There's so many options out there for you. So, I think it's a really good comment and good question, but I think a lot of the data isn't really, showing that. Although I will say, and we heard this yesterday from our economists, inflation is such right now at over 8% that despite, these increases in wages, real wages, are actually, not keeping up with inflation, which is, a considerable problem as well.
Thanks so much for that, Cheryl. There's a lot of great conversation taking place in the chat. We're getting close to our closing time. So with that, I'm going to thank Cheryl Oldham for joining us to go over the America Works initiative. And we'll be sure to be communicating with this group as that guide from America Works is published publicly. So just keep your eyes peeled for that. And we're always happy to set up kind of a follow-up session with the network in terms of digging through it once all of the material is available. But thank you again.